Everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today we're going to be discussing the Fall of Ben Shapiro, and it's kind of an interesting thing that I've wanted to talk about for weeks. But timing would so happen that the mainstream media would kind of catch on to this story, and then Ben Shapiro would publish a video crashing out about it. So a little bit of a perfect timing situation here that we can kind of finally get to talking about this thing that I wanted to talk about for weeks and sort of a more Christian reflection on it because I do believe that God is at work. And I have a more optimistic view of the future politically, but again, I'm thinking in terms of a few decades, not necessarily a few years or a few months. But maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm the white pillar, and some doomers have good reasons for disagreeing with me. But I'm going to hope because I think Christians are called to hope, and I do believe that this is one reason that we can see hope now and not just have hope for the future. So we're going to talk about this and Ben Shapiro's crash out. But first, I want you to know Evangelical Dark Web is a Christian news gathering and commentary ministry. And you can support our work over at Evangelical Dark Web's Patreon-like system at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. We also have a free newsletter that's linked in the description below as well. But the least you can do is like this video, subscribe to the channel, to the podcast if you are new. Now, I have this article on the Fall of Ben Shapiro, and New York Magazine published an article last week, and they labeled Ben Shapiro as the king of conservative ink. And I think that is an accurate moniker. I do believe that Ben Shapiro was the king of conservative ink. Basically, after Bill O'Reilly had his fall from grace, it was basically Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, and Glenn Beck would kind of be like the leaders of the industry. Glenn Beck mostly because of the Blaze, but Steven Crowder would be the king of YouTube. He would have the most subs on YouTube. He'd be like the first conservative YouTuber to get like 5 million subs, and I don't know how much he has now, but he has quite a bit. I think he still has the most, even though his channel is not as prominent as it once was. Ben Shapiro, I believe, has the second most, and we're not counting Fox News, which doesn't get views, is just a name, not really a channel. But Ben Shapiro would have like the second highest subscription count in conservative ink, and now his channel's like largely dead and doesn't get views. It's lost like 200,000 subs since it peaked in September of 2025. So that's a lot for someone who is at the top of conservative ink. For his podcast to crash, or at least his YouTube channel to crash by 200,000 views, that is substantial. And other metrics have him down at down 85% since peak viewership. These are metrics that are being used to say that Ben Shapiro's reign at the top is over, and I agree with that assessment. Ben Shapiro is a little butthurt about the assessment and the fact, and he's playing the victim that the mainstream media is recognizing what people on the right have been discussing for months. Like I ran a couple articles on Ben Shapiro's declining subs on YouTube, but it's been a while, but it's also like almost 3 times as much as the last update. Uh, so anyway, Shapiro was the king of conservative ink, and I think his rule was probably most exemplified by the Sunday special. Like when he did the Sunday special back in the day, it was actually really good. It was a really good show. He landed premier guests, and the conversations on there shaped online discourse, like the one he did with Tucker Carlson on truckers and stuff like that. That has resurfaced numerous times because of how prescient and ahead of its time that conversation was. And I remember being on Ben Shapiro's side during that conversation, but I since kind of believe that the economy should serve the nation, not the nation serving the economy. So I've kind of flipped on that because I recognize, hey, we're not just cogs in a GDP machine, which is kind of how Ben Shapiro views Americans. This is just an economic zone for his benefit, but anyway, the quality of his work, because this used to be a very good show. Why did it stop? And there's like a couple of reasons why the Sunday special kind of declined. Like one, COVID. Like when it was no longer an in studio interview in person, like it declined real quick. and it lost the prestige of the production value and stuff like that. And the guests he lined up sucked, like Meghan McCain. Like, who wants to hear from her? Anyway, I'm gonna be polite about that. Who wants to hear from her? There's a couple others that I remember irking me at the time. And then he also did some bad interviews. The most famous one being the Gina Carano one, where she's fresh off of getting fired from Disney. And the all Ben Shapiro wants to do is do a play-by-play on her, her tweet that got her fired or whatever. It was one of the worst interviews I've ever seen because he wanted to focus on tweets and not, it was such a shallow and vapid interview. Like, who cares? I get that Gina Carano is not actually based, and she's told us very many times she's not conservative. She doesn't, and maybe she was just using a right wing audience for, relevance and stuff like that to eventually sell a bad Netflix fight that she tapped out in 17 seconds or whatever. But anyway, I'm digressing. So in 2019, Ben Shapiro had like this rivalry going on with Steven Crowder. And it was actually a very friendly rivalry. Like, I'm not trying to be negative about that. It was a friendly rivalry. They cross streams and stuff like that. No homo. And then, we can talk about Steven Crowder's rise and fall another day. That's another thing. But then COVID happened. I think COVID is the marked turning point for Ben Shapiro's decline for the normies. Obviously, the Groyper Wars happened in like 2019. Ben Shapiro was a little bit above that, whereas Charlie Kirk was more in the mire of that. And Charlie Kirk actually learned from that. Ben Shapiro did not. Ben Shapiro peddled the COVID narrative, which was an obvious lie at the time. It was inexcusable. I do not have excuses for people who peddled the COVID lie, and you should just repent for believing it if you did, because there was no excuse. It was so obvious. It was such an obvious test at the time, and people should have known. People should have known. It was so obvious. Glenn Beck wrote a book about the government manufacturing a crisis to take away liberties. It was a fiction, by the way, but he wrote the book. It was called The Overton Window. It was a political thriller, and yet he would also fall for it hook, line, and sinker. So Steven Crowder sold masks and stuff like that and changed his entire show format. And Ben Shapiro most egregiously defended Anthony Fauci until December of 2020. He scolded his audience about how his wife was a doctor. He said, get the vaccine dopes, lying about, certain claims that the vaccine was making at the time. And a lot of Shapiro's simps will mitigate this by saying Ben Shapiro launched a lawsuit against OSHA and the vaccine mandates by the Biden administration. But here's the thing, that was in Q4 of 2021. Q4 of 2021. COVID was Q1 of 2020. So he waited, was it 6 quarters, 7 quarters to meaningfully fight back? And that's not courage. That is cowardice. That is opportunism. Courage is leading the way. It's standing up for something when it's hard. It is not sensing where the wind is blowing and then getting at the front of a line of a parade. That is not courage. That's opportunism. And filing an easy lawsuit, because that lawsuit was going to win regardless of who filed it, is not courage. It's not fighting. Because there was a time where the Daily Wire could have made a huge difference in our culture, and they chose not to. Ben Shapiro chose cowardice. He chose to lie and go along with the lies. So a lot of new faces in conservative media emerged since 2020, and because audiences reward courage. Uh, Not saying that everyone who is courageous is a good person, but nevertheless, then we can fast forward and actually let's go to 2022 for a second, because the big debate in 2022 was Christ or chaos, and Ben Shapiro being having an anti-Christ religion was on the side of chaos. And so if you were a Christian, you wanted Christ, you didn't want Christless conservatism. Ben Shapiro was really irreconcilable with what you wanted in political culture, and it shows. So this is before most people really caught on to the subversive influence of Israeli politics, Israeli influence on American politics. And anyway, Fast forward to 10/7/2023, it was clear that Shapiro cared more about a foreign nation. Meanwhile, trouble was brewing in the Daily Wire after giving Candace Owens the bag. And, Candace Owens is shady. Her backstory is horrendous. She's a diversity hired. They gave her the bag, then they fire her. They would also go on to lose Brett Cooper, who was very popular. Jeremy Boring, then CEO, would spend the Daily Wire's cash reserves and advantages on creating content for a ghetto Hollywood studio, producing girl boss movies like Gina Carano's movie. I don't know why she keeps coming up, but it's interesting. And a multi-million-dollar fantasy epic, the Pendragon Cycle, which I'm not even bashing the quality of the show. Maybe the show was fantastic, but the problem is, put it on Daily Wire Plus instead of YouTube, somewhere where people could watch it, because people are streaming fatigue. They don't want any more streaming services. You put it behind a very expensive streaming service at the Daily Wire, and then no one sees it, and it comes out at the same time as Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So even all the YouTubers that would have been sympathetic to your cause, like Nerdrotic or Critical Drinker or whatever, they instead focus on the HBO show instead of the Daily Wire Plus show because the timing was horrendous and they got one-upped by something else that was just more marketable product. So anyway, that definitely sunk the Daily Wire, and then they would have to lay off like 25% of its staff amidst failed investments in entertainment media. And then they also buy views, which also killed Ben Shapiro's channel. Like, when you buy views on YouTube, you are killing your algorithm and its ability to grow organically. I don't want to nerd out about how YouTube works, but the way YouTube works, and this is why I asked for new subscriptions, is because new subscriptions are the best way to advance a video. And when you're losing subscriptions, when you're buying views, you're screwing up your metrics that you can't actually grow organically as much as you would like, even when Ben Shapiro has gone hard to the paint in the so-called podcast wars. That is, internet drama is not benefiting his channel. So there are a lot of layers to this. And it's just a confluence of events. So Ben Shapiro would respond to naysayers, and I think I'm going to switch my order of operations on how I wanted to do this video. So Ben Shapiro would respond to naysayers, and this is part of it because he kind of repeats himself because he repeatedly attacks four people. It's Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and Nick Fuentes. He repeatedly attacks those four people. He's got a real bone to pick with all four of them. But here's Ben Shapiro. This is sort of the climax of his near 14-minute diatribe. I believe the tweet was, "All the haters can kiss my ass." And then he, makes his feelings known.
Of the attacks on the Daily Wire is, of course, not just to attack the Daily Wire. It's to destroy traditional conservatism. That's the whole thing, the entire thing, all of it, every bit of it. That's the whole thing. The reason they're coming after the Daily Wire is because they want to come after you. They want to come after traditional conservatives who believe traditionally conservative things. It is no coincidence that at the same time, the Washington Post and New York Magazine and all the rest of these legacy left publications are attacking the Daily Wire. They're also writing strange new respect features on Nick Fuentes and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson. The left wants those people to win. By the way, they're not hiding it very well. New York Magazine's piece says, quote, "Like the Rockefeller Republican of yore, the Shapiro Republican could go extinct entirely." That's what they want, right? They want traditional normie Republicans to go away. It's what they want, and it's what they hope for. And listen, maybe it will turn out that all these people who hate conservatism and what I consider to be traditional American principles, maybe they're right. Maybe it'll turn out that the future of the right, perverted by the algorithmic insanity of the internet, is sloppulism. The Tucker-style grievance conspiracism, complete with the night-scratching demons. Or Candace Owens' usual brand of kookery. Or Nick Fuentes' transgressive Nazi cosplay. Or Theo Vaughn's man-child podcast illiteracy. Maybe that's where the right goes. Maybe that's what comes next. Maybe that's all facilitated by the click whoring of the Megyn Kellys of the world and justified by an appeal to audience numbers because none of these people ever appeal to morality. They just point to their clicks. Maybe Idiocracy wasn't a satire. Maybe it was a prophetic documentary. But here's the thing from where I sit. That does not change one single thing for me. Not a single thing. See, here's the thing. I've been doing this since I was 7.
Then he appeals to how long he's been doing this. But as you can see, he's framing it as, they're not after me, they're after you. And moving on to, was it about 12 and a half minutes? I think he kind of lets his feelings known on. I just think this doesn't help him out because, sure, it's one thing to make your competitors look bad. Like, yeah, obviously there's a lot of shady people on the right. There's a lot of people on the right that, you know, aren't good people and do the numbers. But at the same time, Ben Shapiro isn't that good of a dude either. Obviously, Ten Commandments. If we want to use that as a basis of morality, he rejects Christ. He again, a lot of issues with his so-called traditional conservatism, which we'll get into in a second. But I do want to play this last part where he insists that I haven't changed, which is kind of a James White argument. But at the same time, Matt Walsh has openly embraced the fact that, yeah, he's changed. He's learning. He's seen things, and he's had to take in information, and you can't just use the same tactics that you believed 10 years ago or even 5 years ago almost.
There's a question that I get a lot these days, a lot. From friends, from family. People will come up and they'll say, what happened to all these people? Yeah, they understand New York Magazine and Washington Post and what they are, but what happened to, Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly and all the rest? And I don't know the answer because I'm not a psychiatrist. But here's what I do know. Nobody has ever asked that question about me. No one, because my worldview has not changed. It has not changed. My principles haven't changed because I think those principles are true and good. And those principles are not going to change. So, in the end, take it or leave it. If people
And I guess people are leaving it because at the end of the day, Ben Shapiro's principles are not really that conservative, and he's a neocon. Like, if we go far back enough, his views are not traditional. He believes in a proposition nation. He believes in, opposes mass deportations. His view on marriage is libertarian. It's not traditional, it's libertarian. So that's just 3 issues, but here's a video clip of him opposing mass deportations.
Donald Trump said he wants to deport 20 million of these guys. What do you think of that?
I mean, I think that if we were going to look at deportations, we obviously ought to tranche that out based on criminal record. We ought to tranche it out based on usefulness to the economy. I think we ought to look at each person individually and determine whether they ought to be deported or not.
So that is probably going to lead to a small trickle of people being kicked out of here. So that's not going to accomplish your goal.
Well, I mean, who said that my goal was to mass deport 20 million people all at once?
So you want 20 million undocumented immigrants to stay in America?
No, no, that is not what I'm saying. I fail to see how you got from, I would like to go through one by one in the same way that we do IRS tax forms for literally every American who pays taxes in the United States and go through illegal immigrants and determine who ought to stay in the country and who not ought to stay in the country.
So again, there's nothing actually conservative about that. That is a neocon open borders position where we're just going to let people stay based on whether they're taking the jobs that Americans don't want and paying their taxes. That is amnesty for a price. Those who can afford amnesty, those who aren't a net loss, can get amnesty. And that is, again, anti-conservative. Immigration is the most important issue, and he opposes mass deportations. 20 million is too many deportations for Ben Shapiro. Whereas it's not enough. In reality, we need at least 50 million deportations between illegal and legal immigrants. 50 million should be the goal, just because we don't know how much the number actually is. Maybe it's 100 million, but still, I'm just rounding low here. But we got to think big, and Ben Shapiro doesn't think big at all. So this puts him at odds with an explicitly Christian right that supports mass deportations and a foreign policy that prioritizes America's interest. Again, what's traditional is shilling for a foreign war in, is that a traditional conservative value? The answer is no if you go back far enough. So that's another thing. So are his views really traditionally conservative? No, they're not, if you go back far enough. Finally, when he says that, why hasn't he changed? It's true because Ben Shapiro was always milquetoast. Now, again, maybe that was good when your competition was Fox News. But now that censorship has relaxed since Susan Wojcicki, who, is of the same tribe as Ben Shapiro, is no longer in charge of YouTube, censorship has relaxed a little bit. And competition has thus increased. And Ben Shapiro is hurting from that. He's hurting from increasing competition because his views are milquetoast at the end of the day. So Ben Shapiro remains the same while audiences demand courage that he does not have. He has not shown. He has a high horse, but he does not have courage. And when the competition relaxed, he fell behind, and not even in an election year, and referring to 2024, could lead to new audience capture for him. A lot of political content gets a nice bump during an election year, but that wasn't as much the case for Ben Shapiro. Facts, and this is a way that I want to close it. Facts don't care about your feelings was once a great mantra, but the right learned you win by imposing your will, not by spouting facts. I say we're in a post-debate society because we see that how we win, how we move is we don't have the debate. We just implement policy, and that's how we win. You win by changing the hearts of people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, not by promoting Judeo-Christian values, whatever those are. If Judeo-Christian values were a real thing, by the way, Jews and Christians would have a political coalition and not Jews and Muslims in the West. Every Western country, Jews and Muslims are together in politics. Why is that? Because Judeo-Christian values don't exist. It's not real. Why is it that Jews, gays, and black women were the only demographics that voted more for Kamala Harris than Joe Biden at higher percentages? Why is that the case? Because Judeo-Christian values do not exist. They're not real. So the fall of Ben Shapiro is glorious and should be credited to God. And that's kind of how I want to end that, by giving glory to God for the work that he's doing on the right. And I hope it can continue, and hope better days are ahead. But yeah, that's a little bit of an autopsy on the rise and fall of Ben Shapiro. Mostly the fall, mostly the decline, because he was at the top for a while, but no longer. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We can't have Christless conservatism that he ultimately represents. So that's all I got to say about that for now. My name is Ray, the Evangelical Dark Web. Have a blessed day. Stay based. Christ is King. And we will catch you on the next one.